are continuing to be banned in schools across the United States. PEN America, an organization that advocates for free expression in the U.S., says more than 4,300 books were removed from schools across 23 states from July to December 2023. This surpassed the number of book bans from the entire previous academic year. The surge in book bans has gained momentum in recent years as groups have tried to limit what kinds of books children can access.
Florida had the highest number of book bans last year, with 3,135 books removed across 11 districts. The majority of the bans took place in Escambia County Public Schools, where more than 1,600 books were removed to ensure that they did not violate a statewide education law prohibiting books in libraries that depict or refer to sexual conduct. Some schools removed dictionaries and encyclopedias, according to some reports.
Program director of PEN America's Freedom to Read program said, quote, "What's happening in Florida is incubated and then spread nationwide." So I just don't understand why there's such an effort around book banning when we're living in the age of the internet. How many of these kids can just get on an iPad and access whatever information they want? I think there are some restrictions on what content a child can access, but growing up, I don't think I ever read a book that wasn't age inappropriate. And a lot of the books that have banned are books that were written far before I was born and were on the shelves when I was in elementary school. And there were different sections in the school library based on age. I just find it strange that now, when information is more accessible than ever, we're resorting to making restrictions on books, on something that's not even the primary source of information.
Yeah, I suppose the comparison there would be that a parent has the opportunity to restrict their kid's ability to access technology that has access to the internet, whether it's an iPad or a phone, right? The parent gets to decide whether the kid gets a phone. Similarly, the argument from parental rights activists is that they should have some say over what access their children get to certain books in the library. And I find it kind of interesting that in this PEN America photo that we put up on the screen, one of the books that's listed is "This Book is Gay," and this has been the subject of a large amount of the removals from school libraries. And in this book, there are depictions of various types of sex, including descriptions and glossaries of terms related to kinky sex, to be frank. There's one description of oral sex that says oral sex is popping another dude's peen in your mouth, and the glossary includes information about poop eating fetishes and sex toys. So I don't think there's any world in which that should be available in a child's library, particularly if we're talking about elementary and middle school age kids. Even high school, I think, is way too far. And when you actually look at the content of a lot of these books that are being removed, very quickly, it's hard to defend any of these being kept in access of or kept available for children to access.
Yeah, I just find it so hard to believe that an elementary school kid would even be interested in a book like that. I mean, most elementary school kids are interested in superhero stories. We read like the Little Women series in elementary school. I just don't see an elementary school kid being interested in that. And then even if they were, I'm sure that there are restrictions on what books can be accessed by younger kids that are age appropriate. I think that having laws that ban the books actually removes the ability for parents to make decisions about what books their kids are allowed to read, right? It should be up to a parent if certain books shouldn't be read by their kid, not laws made in the state legislature.
Yeah, but the parent's not there with their kid in the school library, and I don't know what the rules are in these schools, but I remember in my school library, there weren't really restrictions on what books you were allowed to look at. Maybe there were on which ones you were allowed to check out, but we would certainly roam around the library, pick up things that had a cool cover on it and flip through and see if we wanted to read it. And I mean, in this case, this book has this giant rainbow on the front. That might be appealing to a young kid. And some of the other books are explicitly graphic novels that have cartoon depictions of people engaging in sex acts. So I don't think it's, out of the imagination to think that a kid could pick one of these up and look into it without even realizing what they're getting into. And then there's also a lot of pushes from some teachers in these libraries to actually put these books on display prominently to sort of push back against the idea of getting rid of them in school libraries. They put them up in these displays and point to the LGBTQ book section and make them even more easily accessible for kids whose parents might not want them reading this kind of material. I mean, another example is the book Let's Talk About It, which features naked drawings of women with penises and men with vagina, shows kids how to use butt plugs and do anal douching, downplays STDs, and says children should research fantasies and kinks by watching pornography. There's Genderqueer, which features a cartoon image of young people playing with strap-ons and engaging in oral sex. I mean, if a parent really wants their kid to read that, I guess they can order it on Amazon. I don't know why any parent would, but again, for it to be available for a child to access in a library where they can pick up anything off of a bookshelf and maybe even in some cases it's prominently displayed, I just don't think there's any justification for that.
I think there's an undue focus maybe on the amount of sexual themes in some of the books that were banned. But Charlotte's Web is a book that was banned in so many districts, and it was deemed inappropriate because it depicted animals that can talk and act just like humans. That, to me, is a ridiculous reason to ban a book for children. Children have imaginations. They read story tales that are not representative of reality whatsoever. And I think that book is fine for children. And so while it has been generally the discourse that the problem with a lot of the books being banned is that we're teaching kids about sex at a premature age, right? We don't want a kid learning about sex too early and, robbing them of their innocence. I think that's bad, that there's a certain age where it's necessary to talk about sex and ages where it's completely unnecessary and maybe even inappropriate or damaging for a young child's development. And parents make a determination about where that is. And I think most parents care very much about their children and their future and feel that way as well. But a book like Charlotte's Web being banned, why? Because animals talk and act like humans? Is there a religious reason for wanting to ban this book? This seems like a determination that should absolutely be made by a parent, whether or not they can read a book about animals talking and acting like humans. It seems that, yes, there should be some level of control about what ideas children can access, but to the extent that these laws have been used, I think is way too far in the direction of banning books when they seem perfectly fine for kids.
Yeah, I do remember in the early 2000s, there was a big push to remove books like Charlotte's Web or To Kill a Mockingbird because of its use of the N-word, or even Harry Potter because some parents were concerned about the depictions of wizardry and witchcraft. And I agree that things like that go too far. Based on the research that I've done, the latest attempts to rid libraries of these books are based on the sexually explicit content. The Florida law, for example, I believe specifically refers to books that depict or refer to sexual conduct. So, I mean, that's a pretty clear red line for me. And when you ask parents about this, it's amazing how quickly the polling flips when you frame the question that way. Because if you just ask them if they want to remove books from libraries or ban books, 71% of voters, including 70% of Republicans, say no, they don't want to do that because that feels illiberal to them. That feels objectionable. They want their kids to have access to different, obviously, viewpoints. But when you ask them if they oppose books containing explicit sexual depictions of sex acts, then all of a sudden you have 69% who say yes, they do want those books to be removed, including 79% who oppose it in middle school libraries and 85% who oppose it in elementary school libraries. And there's also been some research from the Heritage Foundation that suggests that PEN America's report is actually exaggerating how many books have been banned. A lot of the books that are on their supposed banned book list are not actually removed from libraries entirely, but are held separately for high school students. So one of them was from the poet Amanda Gorman, who performed a poem at Joe Biden's inauguration. She claimed that her book of poetry was banned, and it was merely moved from elementary school libraries to middle school libraries. So there's a lot of, I think, misinformation surrounding exactly what this issue is that is coming from places like PEN America. But I'm glad that we at least agree that there is a line in terms of what might be acceptable to have in a library and what isn't, and that laws related to it should be crafted intentionally to make sure that those boundaries aren't crossed. Unfortunately, we're out of time. We're going to leave it there. We'll be back with more Rising after this.